Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi everyone, Stewart Andrew Alexander, back again with another exciting guest today who's got some really great insights to share with us. So I just can't wait to hear what he has to say. So with that said, my guest today is an executive leadership coach with over 20 years of experience with top business, government, social enterprise leaders, elite Fortune 500 companies, big government systems, high growth tech companies, and great small businesses. So, are you a small business owner or CEO in the New York City area who wants to transform your people, teams, and business challenges into opportunities? Well, my guest today has some fascinating insights, as I alluded to before, surrounding some of the obstacles, some of the misconceptions, unknown pitfalls that might be preventing you from transforming those big challenges, those conflicts and problems into opportunities for innovation and enterprise development. So that said, let's not keep him waiting any longer and welcome him to the show, ladies and gentlemen, founder of Kornbluh Consulting, James Kornbluh. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you, Stuart. How are you today?
I am on top of the world. Couldn't be better. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm here in New York City, and it's a great day, but it's good to be speaking with you.
And I'm so glad you've been able to take the time out of your busy day to share some of your great insights with the listeners. So with that said then, James, let's just jump straight in. And in your own words, could you just briefly describe who's your perfect prospect? Who do you help, James?
At the end of the day, I work with executives, people in leadership positions who either own their own businesses or the CEOs and are responsible for growing their business and their team performance. So it's tech companies, it's professional service companies, it's folks who have international businesses wanting to do business in New York City and the U.S. market. And I both work with those owner CEOs and connect them to what they need in New York City and the U.S.
You're right. So, I mean, with 20 plus years of experience of what you do, there's obviously a broad array of professionals that you can help. But let's understand we're just going to speak to those executives and CEOs and small business owners today, right?
Yes.
Excellent. So with that in mind, when you think about those executives, those CEOs and those small business owners, what are 2 to 3 common obstacles that prevent them from transforming conflicts and problems into business opportunities and innovation?
Well, so it's lonely at the top. Typically, business owners, especially small business owners, are responsible for all aspects of their enterprise. My experience is most small business CEOs don't get the real support or accountability needed to maximize their own performance. There's typically no time and space for professional development in the midst of their day-to-day realities. The biggest challenge that I see is that business owners come to me with people conflicts and problems that are distracting them from their highest value use of time and energy, which typically is rainmaking and business development. But folks come to me with day-to-day operational conflicts and problems that distract them and get in the way. And connected to that is leadership team. Nobody leads an enterprise by themselves. Even solo entrepreneurs have teams. And at the end of the day, it's the leadership team of a small business that drives results. And almost never does a small business leadership team perform to potential.
Okay, so keeping those 3 obstacles in mind that you just shared with us, and James, where you've actually helped a CEO or a small business owner to make that transformation from having those internal conflicts and problems, and you've turned those into business opportunities. Can you just share maybe two or three case studies, short case studies, obviously keeping client confidentiality in mind? I think that would be great for the listeners to have a listen to that. So please go ahead.
Sure. Let's do one high growth tech company. They will remain anonymous. Founder, CEOs, and the chief technical officers came to me. They're in a high growth phase of their development. They've expanded their team, they're hiring, and there are people conflicts all over the organization. So their technology is going well, investment has happened, and there are people conflicts. And that's a symptom of leadership, the lack of organization, and in this case, the lack of experience in terms of how to create a peaceful, collaborative, and high-performance work situation. And so at the end of the day, that was an advisory arrangement that I had with the CEO, and he and I reorganized, redesigned the structure of how people relate to each other, and also did a bunch of conflict management. And so we got rid of the actual day-to-day conflicts that are driving people nuts, and we use those as a doorway into what needs to change. Typically, conflicts and problems are pointing to a need for change, and so then the question is, what needs to change? In this case, it was the lack of experience of people in management roles, and so part of this is about importing experience management into a young organization.
What are 2 to 3 popular myths, or let's say misconceptions, that the executive leaders who you work with may have about transforming conflicts and problems into business opportunities?
Well, it's really probably a myth or a misconception about the role of coaches and the role of outside advisors. I would say misconception one is that the executive, the owner, the founders are responsible for their own success and don't need outside support, guidance, and insight. That it's a waste of time and money, and the best way to develop oneself and their team is to just do it, is to lead by example. I would say that every high performer needs outside advisors and coaches. Every athlete, individual athlete, every team has a coach. Most successful business owners and executives have coaches too, because it's the coach's job to support and hold leadership accountable for their brilliance, for their integrity, and for their performance. Most executive leaders think I can do it on my own, and they're successful because of and in spite of that belief. The other, I would say, misconception, this partially has to do with the coaching industry, has to do with there's no way of measuring the results of coaching and the coach's involvement. There's no way to measure ROI. And if I can't measure results, then there's no reason to spend time and money on leadership development. I suggest that, particularly using Marshall Goldsmith's system, there is a way to measure results. And I partner with my clients to both measure leadership development and the connection between enhanced people performance with business performance. So there is a way to measure results. The other thing is that a lot of folks believe that outside advisors don't understand me or my business and are in no position to provide inside advice in a domain where I'm the ultimate expert. And I would agree with that. And my attitude about business owners and executives is that they are probably the experts in their business. On the other hand, everyone needs outsiders who have fresh insight into an operation, into leadership, and into the bottom line. And so I make my clients the experts, yes, and I'm the humble outside talent expert that understands people, understands teams, and understands how to build trust and performance.
So, James, you brought up a really interesting point there in terms of measuring results. Now, in all the time that I've been doing these interviews and interviewed experts like yourself, that particular misconception always seems to pop up. If you could just share just an element of how one could go about that. How does one actually measure results? Now, obviously, you don't have the time, and it's obviously what your expertise and what you get paid for. But if you could just share one example of how leadership coaching can be measured, how it can be quantified, I think that would be a great insight for the listeners out there, if you could.
Sure. Well, it's actually the thing that distinguishes Marshall Goldsmith's approach to executive leadership coaching and everyone else in the marketplace. And it's why I was attracted to be trained by Marshall and his team to be a certified leadership coach in their process. And so what Marshall and his team have done is build what they call a stakeholder-centered approach to coaching. And so it's actually, so if I have a CEO who is my client and I'm coaching that CEO, part of my job is to help him or her to identify the stakeholders, the people in their organization, their direct reports, if there's a chairman of the board, their leadership team who have a stake in this leader's success. So those are the stakeholders. And it's those people that are going to be measuring the success of the leader's evolution as a leader and as a driver of business performance. And so the Marshall Goldsmith approach uses mini surveys throughout the one-year engagement, the leadership development engagement, and the leader is in monthly communication with his or her stakeholder group. And at a quarterly point, the stakeholders will measure the leader's development. And so you can clearly see, based on the feedback of the stakeholders, when someone is developing and growing and when they're not, and have either reached a plateau or are not improving at all. And so that's one of the ways that we measure development is through the stakeholder group. And so it is a measurable process. The other way that I do it, and this is connecting Marshall's process with my process, and it's why I really love working with small businesses, and it's small successful businesses, is that we can look at the bottom line. Based on a year's engagement, not only are we going to be measuring results from the perspective of stakeholders, in terms of how an executive leader performs their day-to-day role as a leader, but we can look at the bottom line, the financial bottom lines, and if there are other bottom lines in terms of impact and differentiation in the market. We can look at financial and other bottom lines and make a direct correlation between the work that we do with the executive and his or her team and the bottom line results.
Can we just speak a little bit now about some of the unknown pitfalls that you've come across during your career, James? So when you're thinking about the executive leaders that you help, what are one or two unknown pitfalls that they might not be aware of when it comes to transforming those internal conflicts into business opportunities?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a failure or a refusal to ask for help. Pitfall number one is a belief system that says, I'm in charge, I need to know, and if I don't know, there's something wrong with me. And so this is about understanding that nobody does leadership alone, and that it's a sign of strength to be able to ask for help. So that's number one. And it really is the value of outside advisor coaches is that we provide typically confidential, private support for people in leadership positions who in many cases believe they should be doing it on their own. They don't need help. They don't want to ask for help. They need to do it alone. And connected to that is the failure to empower their team and stakeholders in the organization, both in contributing to a leader's development, but also in taking responsibility for the bottom line. I see over and over and over again that leadership is a one-person operation. And it's not. It's never a one-person operation. Leadership is a team sport. It always is. Nobody does it alone. It's a mistake to believe that I or anyone can do it alone.
In your experience, James, the fear of asking for help, is that gender specific? Is that more male driven or female driven? I'm just interested to know that.
I think that there is an element of gender dynamic there, but I also believe it's culturally driven, and it's driven by the culture within organizations. And so typically, the culture of an organization will drive how people actually behave and perform and are in an organization. And so yes, I in my work with women executives and leaders, there's no question that there is more of a willingness to expose vulnerability, especially in private, than with their male counterparts. On the other hand, in organizations where people are encouraged to raise problems and challenges and conflicts and collaboratively solve them, everyone does it. And so it really is a matter of top leadership, whether or not it's male, female, transgender. It's really about making it safe for people to raise problems, address challenges, and come together to be on the same team, really.
What are 2 or 3 of the most common fears that you come across that even prevent the people who you work with, these executive leaders, from even attempting to transform those conflicts into business opportunities?
Fear number 1 is that I'm a fraud. I'm not really a good leader. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to expose my weaknesses to anyone. And I think it's a legitimate fear. I don't think that much in our lives prepare us for top leadership positions. So I think it's legitimate. What I don't think is helpful is that most people that I find are smart, high integrity, and are just finding themselves in quicksand and don't really know what to do. I would say, connected to that is the fear number 2. So fear number 1 is I'm a fraud, not a good leader. Fear number 2 is probably I don't know what to do. I'm supposed to know what to do. That's my job to know what to do. And if I don't know what to do, I'm not doing my job, and I'll be at risk. Someone's going to get rid of me. And so I have to, hide the fact that I don't know what to do. And then I think connected to that is if I bring in outsiders, advisors, coaches, it's a sign of weakness. And I think that in some ways, Marshall Goldsmith and his team and his approach to coaching has revolutionized the executive coaching industry and has really convinced high-performing executives, CEOs, and teams that hiring a coach is really a sign of strength and success as opposed to weakness.
Somewhere out there right now, in the future, as listeners are listening to this recording, there's a CEO, there's an executive leader somewhere in the greater New York City who is feeling like, yeah, I'm a fraud, I'm really not a good leader. I don't want to expose my weaknesses to anyone at any cost. What would you say to that person?
I would say it's natural. Part of my job is to normalize that fear and that feeling. It's normal. It happens all the time. That's the first thing. And the other thing I would say is it's never about what we're not good at. What I use is what we call a strength-based approach to personal, team, and enterprise growth. And so, the focus of my engagement with individuals and teams and enterprises is all about what's working, balanced with what's not working. And so the strength-based approach uses an individual's, a team's, and enterprises distinguishing strengths, the things that make the individual, the team, the enterprise special, and balances that out with really addressing the personal, team, and enterprise-wide difficulties, problems, challenges, conflicts. And together, when we grow strengths and address weaknesses, that's when we get high performance, both for individual leaders, teams, and whole enterprises. So it's natural. It's totally natural. It's not something to run away from. It's actually something to focus on, make time and space for.
So, James, I just want you to think about those conflicts that you come across and that you're helping those executive leaders to solve, and how you turn those conflicts and problems into business opportunities and innovations. Now, while you're thinking of that and thinking of the executive leaders that you help, and this sounds obvious, but why would they even want to do that? Why would they want to turn those conflicts into business opportunities and innovation?
It's typically, and it's not just people conflicts, it's business problems. It's challenges internally on the team, it's challenges in the marketplace, it's the challenge of new market opportunities. And the reason why you want to address and transform conflicts and problems is because typically they're a drain. Conflicts and problems within are natural, and we use them as indicators of change that needs to happen. And so when we look at these challenges, what we see in perspective, when we close the door and we say, all right, let's actually look at what's working and what's not working. When we look at what's not working in the safety, in what I call strategic retreat, where it's safe, when we get to the strategic high ground and we look at what's really not working, that's when we get insight into what's needing to change and what needs to be innovated on. So typically, conflicts and problems point to a need for change, and because innovation and transformation is a kind of change, what we're looking for in looking at conflicts and problems is where the growth opportunities are, both for the team and for the business bottom line. So yeah, it's cost reduction, time, energy, drama reduction, and enhancing trust and bottom line performance.
James, you've been doing this for over 20 years, right?
Yep.
I mean, again, this is another question that's going to sound obvious, but do you really enjoy what you do?
I love what I do. Yes. What I can say is that for the first 15 years or so of my professional life, I performed service as a lawyer, mediator, and conflict coach. And I learned much of what I know today by sitting in the role of mediator. I was hired by mayors and by CEOs and by community-based leaders, and I was always brought in to solve problems within organizations and businesses and communities. And what I saw over and over again, and this is when I made the transition from mediator and conflict coach to leadership advisor and coach, what I saw is that conflicts and problems are reflective of leadership. It's not that the leaders are bad or wrong, it's just that that's how it is. And so, yeah, I love being in the position of being the outside eyes, ears, and insight to help internal leaders to see their business life clearly and to quickly make transformative change so that their work lives are more compatible with who they are, so that they can make the impact and the changes that they know are needed, and so that at the end of the day, they can feel and be as successful as possible.
You know, what I love about what I do here on Impact Makers Radio is I get to speak with people like yourself who are so passionate and who are following their God-given gift, so to speak. I mean, this is what you do, and it comes through just so naturally. There's so much passion and so much empathy for the people who you work with, the people you know you can help the most. So it's been a pleasure, and it's been, for me, it's almost like it's an honor to have people like yourself come onto the show and share your expertise like you've done so far. And I think anybody who's out there listening to this right now, any of the executive leaders who have been listening to you share your insights, would just love to know a little bit more about James Kornbluh. I mean, who is he? He's got all of this this great information and all this experience, but and he's obviously a great looking guy. They've checked you out online to see that you look like the American James Bond version of the British James Bond. Well, they want to know more about you. They want to know a little bit about your backstory. So could you just spend a couple of a few moments just going a little bit into your backstory and how it all relates and connects to the people who you work with today for us, please, James?
Yes. So I consider myself a non-traditional professional in that I traveled the world. When I finished college, I traveled the world, and I was attracted to war zones. And so I first found myself in Central America and then in the Middle East. And so I realized that there was something about conflict that intrigued me, attracted me, and I wanted to participate in being part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. And that drew me to law school. After doing the research, I realized I wanted to be a mediator, and the way to make the most impact as a mediator was to go to law school, and I immediately became a law professor. I have a knack for working with people in leadership positions, teaching, training, coaching. And I went to Cardozo Law School in New York City, was in the mediation clinic, and one of my mentors, Lou Love, who's still a professor at Cardozo, hired me into the clinic, and we partnered on building a world-class training program for lawyers and law students. And that was my doorway into working with leaders in business, government, and social enterprise. And so it really became clear to me over the years that I do have a gift for listening and for listening beneath the surface to what's really going on, especially in cross-cultural communication and cross-cultural business environments, and being the bridge that makes it safe for people to come together, even powerful people to come together and to be vulnerable as a doorway into to really driving personal and enterprise-wide performance. So I've learned that vulnerability really is something that is underestimated, undervalued, and not really accepted in a business setting. And it's absolutely non-negotiably required. And so what I do is I make a safe place for people to do it privately so they don't have to expose their vulnerabilities in public or in their organizations, because it's typically not safe to do that.
So you've mentioned a couple of times Marshall Goldsmith.
Yes.
Just expand a little bit on that for those out there that are not familiar with Marshall Goldsmith.
Yeah, so for many years, people have asked me to coach them. And I initially responded by saying, well, I'm a soccer coach, I'm a basketball coach, I will coach mediators. But I tended to decline coaching opportunities for the first part of my career because I didn't really understand the value of leadership coaching. And so I've been following Marshall Goldsmith for a number of years. One of my clients was part of his coaching network and has been encouraging me to connect with Marshall's network, and it's a global leadership network. Marshall is probably the number one leadership coach in the world. He's, even though our President Obama is about to leave office, he's President Obama's coach, and he's coached to top leaders in government, business, and social enterprise. Marshall has a measurable, guaranteed system to develop leaders that's been tested nationally and internationally. And so he's got a process that is unbelievable. It's off the charts, smart, simple, and accessible for anyone. And so what I've done is I've gotten trained in his process, and I now integrate Marshall's process and his brand with my personal expertise and differentiation in that historically I'm a lawyer, mediator, and conflict and problem solver. And so I'm a non-traditional leadership coach. I don't come from the HR world, though I do advise HR professionals. I come from a practice place where I have spent many years advising and coaching leaders, and now I'm partnering my experience and expertise with Marshall's team and his process that is rare in that it's measurable. I don't know any other executive coaching enterprise that is able to measure results like Marshall and his team do. So that's why I was attracted to Marshall. And it's been incredible for me because what it does is it connects me with executive leadership coaches all over the planet. And so right now I'm working with folks in Europe, Africa, Canada, Asia, and it really connects me, who is New York-centric, to the world. And so, the next stage of my professional leadership development is really to network with leaders all over the world and use my New York-based contacts and client base and resource base as a resource to partners all over the world.
I'm an executive leader, a small business owner, and I'm based in New York. And I've been listening to you speak now for the better part of 30 minutes or so. And I'm just wondering, before the end of the show, what would be your best piece of advice for me? I have my organization, I've got my teams, and we have these conflicts, and I'm wanting to transform them into business opportunities and innovations. What would be the best piece of advice that you could leave me with?
I would say that make the time and the space to get real with yourself first. Get real with what the costs of whatever friction or problems you're dealing with really are, and get real with whether or not you have the support and the accountability systems built into your leadership that help you to address and transform those costly conflicts and problems into business opportunities. If you don't, then I would say give me a call or email me and we can talk. I'm always about the right connections, the right client partnerships. I don't work with everybody. Not everybody works with me. It's about what you need. And if there's an overlap between what you need, that's high priority, mission critical to you and your business, and there's an overlap between that need and what I have to offer. So I would say make the time and space to get real with yourself. That means being courageous, in focusing and addressing things that you may not be comfortable addressing. Humble, right? Because humility is critical to development. And disciplined, not just going through the day-to-day, but actually being disciplined in addressing and focused on what's working as well as what's not.
James, we've come to the end of the show. If there's somebody out there who wants to connect with you, somebody who wants to know more about you, how would they do that? What's your contact details, James?
james.kornbluh@gmail.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, James Kornbluh, or you can call me, 646-337-5057.
Excellent. James, I'm going to leave the last words with you. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the listeners before we say goodbye?
No, just thank you, Stewart. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of my experiences, and that's it. I appreciate this opportunity.
It's been a privilege having you on the show and having you demonstrate your expertise. You're certainly an educator and an advocate for your client success, and I'm sure that anybody listening to this show in the future is going to get some great benefit from it. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for another show on Impact Makers Radio. This was yours truly, Stewart Andrew Alexander, saying goodbye, take care, and we'll talk real soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.